The Mitchell house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in suburban Denver, a two-story colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn and a welcome mat that had never actually welcomed anyone. Not really. Sydney Mitchell learned at 11 years old that food was a luxury. Her mother, Diane Carver, was a small business consultant who specialized in helping other people build their brands while meticulously curating her own. Her Instagram feed featured 12,000 followers, Sunday dinners, weekend getaways, and Christmas trees adorned with matching ornaments. Blessed, she'd write beneath each photo. So grateful for my little family. Her father, Robert Sterling, was a construction project manager who spent his days building things for other people and his evenings absent from his own home. He came home at 7, ate dinner in front of the television, nodded at whatever Diane said, and retreated to his study. He wasn't cruel, he simply wasn't present. Sydney had learned to take care of herself early, making her own breakfast since she was 8, walking to school alone, signing her own permission slips when her mother forgot. Sydney doesn't need much attention, Diane would tell guests with a light laugh. She likes being alone, right, sweetheart? She never waited for an answer. Sydney would nod because if she didn't, her mother would sigh like she'd just ruined an entire dinner party. 2 weeks before they left, Diane called Sydney downstairs. She was sitting on the couch, laptop open to a flight booking website. Robert stood by the window, staring at the yard, saying nothing. Sydney, Diane said, her voice light as if announcing dinner plans. Your father and I need a break. A month in Europe, Paris, Rome, Santorini. You're 11 now. Old enough to stay home. Sydney stood frozen. Who will I stay with? You'll stay alone. Diane didn't look up from her screen. What's so hard about that? A whole month? Her mother's voice sharpened. Don't be dramatic. You know how to take care of yourself. I've taught you everything. Sydney looked at her father. He was still facing the window, his back to her. Can Grandma come stay? Sydney asked. Or Aunt Ruth? Grandma's busy. Diane cut her off. And Ruth. She paused, lips pressed tight. You know, I don't speak to her. Sydney didn't know why her mother hated Aunt Ruth. She only knew Ruth hadn't been allowed in their house for 5 years. Diane stood up, pulled two $10 bills and a silver plastic card from her purse. She placed them on the table in front of Sydney. $20 for snacks if you need them, and this card is for emergencies. She looked at her daughter, eyes cold. Don't use it unless the house is on fire. Understand? Sydney nodded. Good. Diane turned back to her laptop. Flight's Monday morning. We'll be back in exactly 1 month. Sydney picked up the money in the card and walked upstairs. She didn't know that credit card had never been activated. Monday morning, Sydney stood at the door and watched them leave. Diane wore a floral dress, hair freshly done, pulling a brown Louis Vuitton suitcase. Robert carried 2 bags, loading them into the Uber waiting at the curb. Remember to lock up, Diane said without turning around. Don't bother anyone. And remember, you're old enough now. They got in the car pulled away, disappeared around the corner. Sydney stood at the door for 5 more minutes, as if they might come back and say it was all a joke. They didn't come back. That first night, the house was so quiet, Sydney could hear the refrigerator humming, the clock on the wall, the wind outside the window. She lay in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling until 3 in the morning. The next morning, she opened the refrigerator, nearly empty. Half a carton of milk, 4 eggs, a loaf of bread 2 days past its expiration date, some jars of tomato sauce, no meat, no vegetables, nothing that could be called a meal. She counted her money. Two $10 bills, $20. She did the math. $20 divided by 30 days, 66 cents a day. Maybe if I just eat less, she told herself. She pulled out the credit card, tried to order pizza online, entered the card number, hit confirm. Transaction declined. She tried again. Declined. She called the hotline printed on the back of the card, followed the automated prompts. This card is not activated. Please contact your bank for assistance. She looked at the two $10 bills on the table. That was all she had, and her parents were in Paris. Day 3. Sydney walked to the grocery store down the street. She stood in the aisle, calculating every cent. Ramen noodles, 79 cents a pack. white bread $1.29, peanut butter $2.99. She bought 6 packs of ramen and a loaf of bread with her first $10. Got back $2.62 in change. The cashier looked at her. Shopping alone, sweetie? My mom's waiting in the car, Sydney lied. Back home, she rationed the ramen. 1 pack split into 2 meals, half a pack with hot water for breakfast, the other half for dinner. Day 5. Sydney tried calling her mother. 3 rings. 4, 5. Hello? Diane's voice was distant. Music played in the background. Mom, the credit card doesn't work. I don't have money for food. Sydney, Diane sighed. You're being dramatic again. You have $20. You can eat less. I'm at a restaurant. Stop calling. But Mom, click. She hung up. Sydney sat down on the kitchen floor, back against the empty refrigerator, and cried. That night, she opened her mother's Instagram. New post. Diane standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, beaming, holding a glass of champagne. Caption: Paris living my best life. 123 likes, 15 comments. So gorgeous. You deserve this. Goals. Sydney stared at that photo for a long time. Then she grabbed the old iPad her mother had given her last month, the one Diane didn't need after buying a new one, opened the camera, and hit record. Today is day 5, she said, her voice shaking. Mom posted a photo from a Michelin star restaurant. I ate half a pack of ramen. She didn't know then that someone was watching, just not in the way she expected. Day 7. Mr. Harold knocked on Sydney's door. Harold Freeman lived in the blue house next door. 70 years old, a retired aerospace assembly supervisor who spent his days in his woodworking shop building birdhouses and rocking chairs for neighbors. A widower. He lived alone with an old cat named Whiskers. He'd wave at Sydney when she walked to school. They'd never really talked. Sydney opened the door, trying to look normal. Hey there, kiddo, Mr. Harold said, looking her up and down. I noticed your parents' cars haven't been around for a few days. Everything okay? Yes, sir. They're on a business trip. Business trip? He raised an eyebrow. Who's watching you? Sydney wanted to lie, but she was too tired, too hungry. Her lips were cracked, her face pale, and she knew he could see it all. I'm fine, she said, but her voice trembled. Mr. Harold was quiet for a moment. Then he asked gently, Have you eaten today, sweetheart? Sydney swallowed. Yes, I have. Would you like to come over for dinner? I made too much. Hate to see it go to waste. She knew he was lying. He lived alone, but she was too hungry to refuse. That evening, Sydney sat at Mr. Harold's kitchen table and ate spaghetti like she'd never eaten before. He didn't say anything, just sat across from her, watching with an expression she didn't understand. After dinner, he asked, Where are your parents really? And she told him everything. Europe, 1 month, $20, the card that didn't work. Mr. Harold was silent for a long time. Do you need me to call someone? He asked. The police? A relative? No, Sydney almost shouted. Please don't. My mom said if I bother anyone, She didn't finish. But Mr. Harold understood. All right, I won't call anyone, but I'm going to bring you food every day, and if you ever need to document anything, you write it down. Sometimes evidence is what protects you. Mr. Harold kept his silence for 10 more days, until silence was no longer an option. Week 2. Summer school started. Diane had signed Sydney up months ago, not because she wanted her daughter to learn, but because she didn't want Sydney lounging around the house. Now, Sydney understood. Her mother needed her somewhere so no one would ask why she was home alone. First day, Sydney arrived late. Clothes wrinkled, she didn't know how to use the washing machine. Hair tangled, no one to help her brush it. Dark circles under her eyes, she still couldn't sleep. Jessica Hart, her homeroom teacher, watched her walk in. Mrs. Hart was an elementary school teacher who'd been at Westbrook Academy for 15 years. She'd seen tired children before. But something about Sydney made her pause. Sydney, are you feeling all right? Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Hart didn't say anything else, but she felt her eyes on Sydney all through class. Day 3 at school, Sydney nearly fainted during math. Everything started spinning. The blackboard blurred. She gripped her desk, but her legs had no strength left. Sydney, Mrs. Hart's voice. When Sydney woke up, she was lying on the nurse's office bed. Natalie Chen, the licensed practical nurse who worked the geriatric ward at the hospital and volunteered at the school during summers, was looking at her with worried eyes. Did you eat breakfast this morning? Nurse Chen asked. Yes, I did. Half a pack of ramen, 6 hours ago. Nurse Chen put Sydney on a scale. Then she looked at the number, frowning. You've lost 9 pounds in 2 weeks, she said. Where are your parents? Silence. Sydney. Her voice softened. Who's taking care of you? Sydney looked down at her hands. Thin, pale. No one. Nurse Chen and Mrs. Hart exchanged a look. Mrs. Hart sat down beside Sydney, her voice gentle but serious. You don't have to say anything right now, but I need you to know I'm not going to pretend I don't see what I see. Sydney didn't cry. She'd forgotten how. But for the first time in 2 weeks, she felt like someone actually saw her. That night, her mother called. Sydney was sitting in the kitchen eating the rice Mr. Harold had brought over when her phone buzzed. International number. Hello, Sydney. Diane's voice cut like a blade. I heard the school called. What did you tell them? Nothing. Shut up, she cut Sydney off. I'm in Santorini having dinner with your father, and I have to take a call from the school saying you have health concerns. Do you know how embarrassed I am? Sydney swallowed the rice. It stuck in her throat. Mom, I'm hungry. You're being dramatic again. Diane was shouting now. You have $20. You have food in the refrigerator. You have everything, and you still find ways to bother me. The credit card doesn't work. Then don't use it. I told you. Emergencies only. House on fire only. Sydney went silent. Sydney, listen to me. Her voice dropped, colder now. If you tell anyone anything, the school, the neighbors, anyone, I will send you to boarding school when I get back. You won't live at home anymore. You won't see anyone you know. Understand? Silence. Sydney, understand? Yes. Good. She heard her father say something in the background, but he didn't take the phone, didn't ask if she was okay. Don't call again. I'm trying to relax. Click. Sydney set the phone down. Her hands were shaking. She opened her mother's Instagram. New photo. Diane and Robert in front of a Santorini sunset, smiling radiantly. Caption. Sunset dinner with my love. Sydney grabbed the iPad, hit record. Mom just called, she said, her voice no longer shaking, just hollow. She threatened to send me to boarding school if I tell anyone. She said, I'm being dramatic. She paused, looking straight into the camera. I'm not being dramatic, I'm starving, and she doesn't care. That night, Sydney decided if no one would believe her, she would have evidence that would make them believe. From day 18, she recorded videos systematically. Every morning, she woke up, grabbed the iPad, and started filming. Day 18. She opened the refrigerator, pointing the camera inside. 2 eggs left, half a loaf of bread, ran out of milk yesterday. She filmed the bathroom scale. 84 pounds, down another pound from last week. She screenshotted her mother's emails. Stop bothering me. I'm on vacation, and read them aloud on camera. She kept a written journal, too. Each page clearly marked date, meals, how she felt. Day 19. Ate 1 egg and half a pack of ramen. Mom posted a photo eating oysters in Monaco. Comment, living the dream, I'm living a nightmare. Day 20. Stomach hurt all day, no food left. Mr. Harold brought a sandwich, don't know how to thank him. Day 21. School emailed mom. She didn't respond. Mr. Harold watched her getting weaker each day. You have to let me help, he said one evening, voice worried. I can't just stay quiet forever. You promised. I know, he sighed. But you're not okay. I'm going to call the school. I won't give details. I'll just tell them someone needs to check on you. Sydney wanted to argue, but she was too tired. Okay, she said, but don't tell them your name. The next morning, Mrs. Hart received an anonymous call. A concerned neighbor, a student named Sydney Mitchell, needed checking on. Mrs. Hart looked at the notes she'd been keeping, dates, symptoms, what Sydney had said, everything she'd observed over the past 2 weeks. She knew she was a mandatory reporter. She knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. Day 22. Sydney received an email from the school. We need to speak with your parents. If we cannot reach them within 48 hours, we will be required to notify the authorities. The principal called Diane on the international emergency number. Sydney wasn't there for that call. But later, Karen, the woman who would change everything, told her what happened. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Principal Davis from Westbrook Academy. What is it? Diane's voice was sweet. Concerned. Mother mode activated. Did Sydney do something? We're concerned about Sydney's health. She's showing signs of malnutrition. Oh, goodness, Sydney's being dramatic again. Diane laughed lightly. She's an imaginative child, you know. There's a babysitter staying with her, Mrs. Johnson. She comes by every day. Could you give us Mrs. Johnson's contact information? A beat of silence. Let me look it up. I'll send it right over. She never sent it. The principal waited 24 hours. No Mrs. Johnson's number, no one to verify. Meanwhile, Nurse Chen filed an official medical report. Sydney Mitchell, age 11, lost 9 pounds in 3 weeks. Signs of malnutrition, parents unreachable, investigation recommended. A mandatory report was submitted to Colorado Child Protective Services. A case was opened. A caseworker was assigned. Her name was Karen Oilerin. That night, Diane sent Sydney an email. Subject line empty. Just one paragraph. Sydney, I know the school called. If you say anything, if you embarrass me, I will tell them you're a lying child who needs psychiatric treatment. You'll be sent away, and no one will believe you. Understand? Sydney read the email 3 times. Then she opened the iPad and hit record. Today is day 22, she said, her voice calmer than she felt. Mom just emailed threatening to tell people I'm mentally ill if I tell the truth. She read the email aloud on camera, every single word. This is evidence, she said. I'm not lying, and I won't be silent anymore. If you're thinking, why didn't Sydney just call the police from the start? Remember, she was 11 years old. She'd been taught that parents are always right, that bothering people is bad, that if she was good enough, she'd be loved. It took 20 days of hunger to understand. No amount of being good would ever make them care. Day 22. Karen Oilerin came to Sydney's door. Sydney had never met a CPS caseworker before. She expected someone cold, official, scary. Karen wasn't any of those things. She was a black woman in her 40s, wearing a simple blazer and kind eyes. She smiled when Sydney opened the door. Hi, Sydney. My name is Karen. I'm from Child Protective Services. May I come in? Sydney hesitated. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Don't bother anyone. Don't embarrass me. But she was so tired of being alone. Okay, she said. Karen stepped inside. Her eyes moved around the house, the dark living room, the pile of dishes Sydney didn't know how to wash, the silence that hung in every corner. Your parents are in Europe? She asked gently. Yes, ma'am. 1 month. 8 more days until they come back. Who's been taking care of you? Sydney looked at the floor. No one. Karen didn't react. No shock, no judgment. She just pulled out a small notebook and wrote something down. Can I see the kitchen, Sydney? Sydney led her there. Karen opened the refrigerator, nearly empty. Just some condiments and a half-eaten loaf of bread Mr. Harold had brought. She looked at the trash can. Empty ramen wrappers. She looked at Sydney. Thin, pale, dark circles under her eyes. Sydney, she said softly, do you have anything you want to show me? Sydney didn't know why she trusted Karen. Maybe because she was the first adult who asked instead of assumed. Maybe because she was desperate. She went to her room and came back with the iPad. I've been recording, she said, every day. In case no one believed me. Karen took the iPad. She pressed play on one of the videos. Sydney, standing in front of the empty refrigerator, reading the date, her voice shaking. When it ended, Karen looked at her. You're very brave, Sydney. These videos are important. Then she asked Sydney a question no one had ever asked before. Sydney, do you want to be safe? For the first time, Sydney said it out loud. Yes. Karen called Diane the next day. Sydney wasn't in the room, but Karen told her everything afterward. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Karen Eulerin from Colorado Child Protective Services. CPS? Diane's voice shifted. Smooth, warm, the perfect concerned mother. Oh my goodness. Is Sydney all right? What happened? We've received reports of possible neglect. Your daughter has been alone for over 3 weeks. Alone? No, no. There must be a misunderstanding. Diane laughed lightly. Sydney has a babysitter, Mrs. Johnson. Lovely woman. She comes every day to check on her. I see. Could you provide Mrs. Johnson's contact information? Of course. Let me find it. I'll email it to you right away. She never did. Karen checked. There was no Mrs. Johnson in the neighborhood directory. No one by that name had visited Sydney's house. No one could confirm a babysitter existed because she didn't. Karen filed a subpoena request for Diane's credit card statements, legal, official, through the proper channels. 3 days later, the bank sent the records. Karen sat Sydney down and showed her a printed page, numbers, dates, transactions. Sydney, she said carefully, your parents spent $47,312 in Europe this month. Hotels, restaurants, shopping. Sydney stared at the numbers. The supplementary card they gave you? Karen continued. It was never activated. Not a single transaction because it couldn't be used. Sydney knew. She'd always known. But seeing it written on paper official, undeniable was different. They spent almost $50,000 on their trip, Karen said quietly. And they left you with 20. Sydney didn't cry. She thought she'd forgotten how. But something inside her cracked. What happens now? She asked. Karen closed the folder. Now, we make sure you're safe, and when your parents come home, there will be consequences. Diane called Sydney the night after she spoke with Karen. Sydney was at Mr. Harold's house. Karen had arranged for her to stay there temporarily while the investigation continued. Safe, fed. But Diane didn't know that. Sydney's phone rang. International number. Her stomach dropped. Hello, Sydney. Diane's voice was ice. What did you tell them? Mom, You understand what you've done? She wasn't yelling anymore. That was worse. You're destroying this family, everything I've built, our reputation, our life. For what? Because you couldn't handle being alone for a few weeks? I was starving, Mom. You were fine. Now she was shouting. I gave you money, I gave you a card, I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? By calling the government on your own mother? Sydney gripped the phone tighter. The card didn't work. You knew it didn't work. Silence. Sydney, listen to me. Her voice dropped. Dangerous. When I get back, you're going to tell them you exaggerated. You're going to say you wanted attention. You're going to fix this. Something shifted in Sydney. Something that had been bending for 11 years finally stopped. No. Excuse me? I said no. Sydney's voice was steady. I'm not lying for you. I have videos, Mom. The empty refrigerator. My weight dropping. Your emails threatening me. Everything. Long pause. What videos? I recorded every day. The food I didn't have. The scale. Your Instagram post from Monaco while I ate half a pack of ramen. All of it. Diane's breath caught. You're lying. I'm not. And I'm done protecting you. She hung up. Sydney sat in Mr. Harold's kitchen, hands trembling, but not from fear anymore. 3 days later, Diane posted on Facebook, coming home to my baby girl. Can't wait to throw a party and share our amazing trip with everyone. 40 people RSVP'd, and Sydney knew that party would be where everything ended.